Shalom, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Jewish community of Sedona and the Verde Valley. If you're in the lobby, we'd love you to come in and sit down so we can all start together. People are still signing in very excitedly. So this is a Shabbaton. Anything in Hebrew that ends with on means something big. So Shabbat is Shabbat, but Shabbaton. Oh, we have Friday night services, Saturday morning Torah study. Tonight is a concert. Tomorrow are workshops from 2 to 5. This is a big weekend. I'm so glad you're all here. I'm Rabbi Alicia Magal, and this is my friend and colleague and a mensch, Rabbi David Zaslow, all the way from Ashland, Oregon, and his beautiful bride of how many years?
43.
43 only, Deborah in Hebrew. And so they're going to be doing song, story, and weaving magic, which is what you do. I have to say something, you know, a bio usually says the books that they've done and the places they've been. No, what I want to tell you is just one thing. We all like to avoid difficult situations in our life. But when Rabbi Zaslow teaches about how to approach these difficult times, and we're in one of them now, instead of wanting to avoid it, it just opens our heart and we're ready to take it on. And I really want to thank you for that. That is a great gift. And so who knows the journey we're going to take today? I'm as excited as you are, and who doesn't love a story and who doesn't love a song? And please turn off your phones because we want just to have the uninterrupted, beautiful sound from here. Now you notice the UFOs behind me as the light went down, and the beautiful rocks are just fading away. It might come that I have to put down the blinds if it's too glaring or too reflective. But I won't disturb you when we do that. But if you want to mention the rocks, the red rocks, the beauty, I'll leave them up until I hear that as my cue to put them down. Deal?
Deal, but I might mention it constantly.
Oh, okay. All right.
No,
well, thank you so much. I'm going to take my seat and enjoy it. And let's give a beautiful round of applause and welcome to Rabbi Zaslow and Devorah.
Because of my brothers and friends, because of my sisters and friends, please let me ask, please let me say, peace to you. Join me, everybody. Ready? Because of my brothers and friends, because of my sisters and friends, please let me ask, please let me say, peace to you. This is the house of the Lord. I wish the best for you. This is the house of the Lord. I wish the best for you. Join me, no words now. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Try it in Yiddish now. Oy, 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 oy. Ay, ay, ay. Liman bet Adonai Eloheinu, Vaksha tov lach. This is the house of the Lord. I wish the best for you.
Good evening, everyone, including those who are in Zoom land. I assume that's on tonight too, and I'm thrilled to be here for a second night. There are a lot of famous rabbis in Eastern Europe, and they all had disciples. And one of them, this is a story, by the way, that Reb Zalman, who was the teacher of Rabbi Alicia and Rabbi David. This is a story, Reb Zalman used to come for Shabbatons to our neck of the woods, which is Ashland, Oregon. And once when he came, he pulled me aside and he said, here, I've got to tell you a couple of stories that you have to tell. And this was one of them. And he said, in this other story, it doesn't matter who the rabbi is or whatever, but in this one it matters. And the rabbi, or the Rebbe as he was called, was the Sansa Rebbe. And his disciples would travel for long distances to be in his presence and to learn at his feet. And one such disciple was traveling, kind of making a pilgrimage to see the Sansa Rebbe, to study with him. And it was a pilgrimage because it was a 2-day journey, and he had to spend the night at the house of study, the Beit Midrash of another rabbi, and then travel the next day to see the Sansa Rebbe. And the Rebbe who was there said to him, "So, no, why do you have to go all the way to the Sansa Rebbe? Why don't you just stay here and study here? What could they teach you there that you can't learn here?" And the chassid said, "Well, actually, they are teaching us something that we can't learn anywhere else." He said, "Oh, really? What is that?" He said, "Well, they're teaching us to read minds." To read minds? You mean you could tell what I'm thinking? Mm-hmm. I mean, you could tell what I'm thinking right now? Mm-hmm. Okay. What am I thinking? The chassid closed his eyes and he concentrated and he said, "You're thinking that we are surrounded by the presence of God right now and every moment." And the Rebbe said, "No, that's not what I was thinking." And the chassid said, "And that is why I'm going to the Sansa Rebbe. And this is why you come to this shul." I'm going to give it back to Rabbi David.
You know, one thing about our Rebbe, Reb Zalman, may he rest in peace, is that he was a master at understanding the various religions all around the world. And he believed in a concept that Father Matthew Fox taught him, which is called deep ecumenism. Deep ecumenism doesn't mean we just sit in a circle and say, well, we Jewish people believe this, and we Catholic people believe this, and we Protestants believe this, and we Buddhists believe. But deep ecumenism is experiencing the beautiful, beautiful rituals and traditions of other faith traditions. So this is a story, it's a true story about Reb Zalman and Devorah and I, and a group of people from the mainland who went to the Big Island in Hawaii. Reb Zalman had never been to Hawaii, and he wanted to experience that. And so we set up a Shabbaton, a weekend for him there. And before the weekend began, we were going to get together and experience this amazing, amazing holy spot called the Heiau at the King Kamehameha Hotel. Does anybody know Hawaii well enough? Do you know the hotel? In the back of the hotel there's a sacred site there. And what's extraordinary, when you go there, the first thing that shows what a nudnik I am, is I thought, now why would they build a sacred site right where the hotel is? And then I realized, no, shmagegi. They built a hotel right where the sacred site was because it was an amazing place. So Mikahala Roy, who's the priestess and who's the caretaker of that sacred site that her father rebuilt, said, well, tomorrow morning, it was a Thursday, and we were going to have a Shabbaton starting Friday evening. She said, Friday morning, I want you to meet me there at 7 a.m., and we're going to prepare a special package of papaya and all sorts of fruits, and we're going to do a ceremony where you're going to bring it as an offering to our God, whose name is Lano. And now in my mind I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to bring an offering to a god, a Hawaiian god? In Hebrew, in Judaism, we call that avodah zarah. You know, it's like serving an idol, you know? So it was like, and I didn't want to say anything. I went, what time? She said, 7 a.m., please be here. So I really got freaked out, you know? So I called up Reb Zalman. I said, Reb Zalman, I don't know what to do. They wanted me to bring this package of papaya and fruit to their God and bring it as an offering. He said, oh, it's no big deal. I went, really? It's not a big deal? He says, no, no, no. As you're bringing it to the God, just keep going, Adonai Echad, Adonai Echad. There's only one God. God is one. God is one. And God incorporates all the other gods, Adonai Echad. I went, really? It's like, Adonai Echad, that's going to get me out of this whole transgression of idol worship. He said, it'll work, you'll see. So I get there the next morning, and I was pretty nervous. So Mikahala gives me the papaya basket, and if you remember the particular site, you have to walk across water, not on top of water, that's a different religion. You have to walk across, it goes about up to your knees, maybe it's a few hundred feet out there. It's where the altar is, and it's where the statue of Lano is. And you have to walk through the water to bring it to the statue. Now, if you've ever taken a look, Dusty and Lenny, at that particular statue, it's one of these beautiful sculptures where the mouth is really wide, and it's like for dental hygiene practice or something, because there's big teeth, it's sitting there, and it's kind of a scary looking face. So I'm holding the papaya, I'm walking, slogging through the water, and looking at this mouth, at this teeth, and it's looking at me like this, and I went, oh my God, Adonai Echad, Adonai Echad, Adonai Echad. I'm sloshing through the water, Adonai Echad, Adonai Echad. When I got about to the middle, maybe 100 feet in, I cracked up laughing inside myself. I said, this is crazy. Here is this Jewish rabbi from Brooklyn, living in Oregon, bringing a gift of papaya to the Hawaiian god. This is really crazy. So I started smiling, and I looked up, and I tell you, maybe it was my own delusion, but you know that scary face? It started to smile. And I went, oh my God, and then I got chills. I went, my offering's been accepted. So I looked over at Mikahala Roy, she's on the shoreline. She goes like this. I looked it up, some of the other priests who were standing at the statue, they're going like that. It's like everybody knew the offering had been accepted. It was a profound sense of not unity, but uniqueness for a Jewish person to come bringing an offering with total respect and total integrity to my tradition, to be able to go Adonai Echad, and total respect for their tradition. It was really, really a beautiful, beautiful moment. Reb Zalman used to tell the story, and not the story, give a little teaching, that every religion, we're all in a symphony together. We're all playing music, but each religion only gets one instrument. You can't have them all. Some religions think, oh, they're the whole orchestra. No, you're not, right? So the Buddhists get this instrument, the Jews get this instrument, everybody gets one instrument, and that's the harmony, that's the beauty of the symphony that we're all part of. So blessings this evening. I hope this interfaith evening of stories that we're going to be sharing and music will really be very touching and meaningful to you. So, Devorah, you have a little story for us? What you looking for? Oh, put the curtains down. Will the congregation please rise? Should I do a little nigun? I lift up my eyes unto the red rocks. From where does my help come? My help is from the endless one, creator of heaven and of earth. Esaenai el heharim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Esaenai El heharim, me'ayin yavo ezri. My help is from the endless one, creator of heaven and of earth. Ezri me'am Adonai, osei shemayim v'arens.
So we said it was an interfaith evening, so I have to include a Buddhist story. they're not little kid stories, so I'm sorry about that. Maybe we can, sometimes it's hard for me to concentrate. I'm one of these neurodivergent people with ADD, so everything comes in at the same frequency. So, once in Japan, there was a samurai master. Now, he was a samurai who was not just known for his bravery in battle, but also for his wisdom and deep compassion. And everywhere he traveled, he had an entourage. And among that entourage, there was a tea master, whose job it was to make tea for the samurai. And everywhere that they traveled, people would bow down with great respect and reverence to the samurai. And the tea master, who had been with the samurai for many years, had been watching this for years and years, and he thought, I wonder what it would feel like if people would bow down to me, if they would notice me even. And they arrived at a certain city, and as they arrived, of course, everyone bowed down to the samurai, and the tea master was thinking, oh, that looks good. And after a while, the samurai decided to take a nap. And the tea master walked by, and he could see the chamber where his master was sleeping. And right next to him was his suit of armor, and it was lying there, unoccupied. And before he knew it, the tea master had crept into the room, and he began gently just to touch that armor. And it was cold steel, and it felt strong and fierce. And before he knew it, he had taken his leg and he had started to slip it into the armor. And it felt heavy. And he took his other leg and slipped it in. And before long, he had taken the entire suit of armor and he was wearing it. And it felt heavy, and he felt important. And without thinking, he took a step just to see how it might feel. And then he took another step, and before long, he had walked out of the chamber and walked into the street. And wouldn't you know it, everyone bowed down to him. And it felt wonderful. And he carried his shoulders high in that heavy armor as he walked through the town, and everyone bowed to him in reverence. Now, wouldn't you know, in that same town, there was another samurai who was not known for his wisdom and compassion. He was a cruel samurai, and he had heard about the visiting samurai, and he was looking for him to challenge him to a duel. And as the tea master walked through the town, he came upon the cruel samurai. And the samurai, thinking that the tea master was the other samurai, said, I challenge you to a duel. Do you accept? Well, the tea master could feel the hairs on the back of his neck trembling, and he couldn't say a word. He just nodded. All right, tomorrow at noon, be here. And again, the samurai imagined the cold steel of that sword on his neck, and he shook all over, and he just nodded. Well, the tea master went back to his master, samurai. He took off the armor. He woke up his master, and he told him what had happened. And he said, you've got to help me. What can I do? Will you fight him for me? And the samurai said, no, I think this is your battle. Well, would you teach me how to fight? The samurai looked at the old and frail tea master and he said, I don't think so. But he will surely kill me. And the samurai said, yes, he will. And the tea master said, well, what will I do? And the samurai said, let me think on it, and while I'm thinking, make me some tea. And so the tea master began to prepare the tea ceremony. And as some of you may know, the tea ceremony in Japan isn't just making tea. It's a very precise, intricate set of steps. And so the tea master began to focus on the job at hand. He began by unfurling the mats. And then he very carefully placed the cups just so, one on each corner. And then he very gently sifted through the tea leaves. And with each motion, he became more and more absorbed in each step. And he became more and more focused on what he was doing until his movements were moving in perfect harmony with each step of the precise process. And when he was finished, he was completely centered and calm. And the samurai said, now I see what you shall do tomorrow. Tomorrow you will face him as yourself. And the next day at the appointed time, the tea master arrived, not wearing the suit of armor, but wearing his tea robes, and he was carrying the armor on his arm. And when he got there, the other samurai said, are you ready to do battle? And the tea master said, soon enough. First, let's start by having some tea. And again, he began to perform the tea ceremony. And again, he performed each step carefully with great grace and elegance. He unfurled the mats, and he placed the cups, and he sifted the leaves, and he brought all of his years of discipline and training into each motion, in each step, until he was completely absorbed in the process, and he was moving in an elegant dance of harmony. And when he finished, he looked up, and he saw that the samurai had bowed down to him. And the samurai looked up and he said, if you bring 1/2 of the skill and discipline into battle that you bring to the tea ceremony, then I don't stand a chance. I surrender. And the tea master went back to his master, the samurai, and told him what had happened. And the samurai said, today you learned the lesson of doing what you know how to do, doing your best, and being exactly who you are. Now, I said interfaith, and of course with every Buddhist story there's a Jewish version. So here's the Jewish version. There was once a great rabbi, and he would travel around and give divrei Torah, devar. He would give talks on the Torah. And he had a driver who drove him for many, many years. And one day, his driver said to him, you know, I would like to know what it would be like to be you. What if we just change clothes for one day? After all, I have heard your sermons year after year after year. I could give any of your sermons and nobody would know the difference. Well, the rabbi agreed. And so he took off his hat and his shtreimel and all of this garb, and he traded clothes with the driver. And when they arrived at the next town, the driver got out dressed as the rabbi, and everyone greeted him with great respect. And he went into the shul, and He gave a talk like that rabbi had never given before, all of the flourishes and all of the knowledge and the learning, and everyone was absolutely entranced. And afterwards, he took questions. Believe me, he had heard all of the answers to the questions that had been asked the rabbi over the years, and he answered question after question, until finally somebody asked him a question that he had never heard before. And he thought, he got very quiet, and he said, "That question is so easy, even my driver could answer it." So the Buddhists buy peace and tranquility, by the Jews buy our wits.
You know, one thing we learn when we do interfaith work is how much we've learned from each other. All the different religions in the world that have had contact with each other have learned from each other, but often don't give attribution. In other words, we borrow. Okay, we steal from each other. So all the faith traditions have little elements of other faith traditions. Where did that come from? It came from their contact with the Buddhists or the Hindus or the Jews or the Christians. And so this is a kind of an interesting story. There's a couple of evangelical Christians from Tennessee, and they wrote this song, "O Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary." Does anybody know that song? So it's a very beautiful, popular Christian song. Well, it really comes from the Jewish concept, V'yasu li mikdash, v'shachanti b'tocham, build for me a sanctuary, and I'm going to dwell in the people. And so it's in our tradition that the real sanctuary is not just this beautiful building, but is in every one of us. So here's the mashup of the two. O Lord, prepare me to be your sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. In thanksgiving, I'll be your living sanctuary for you. So we borrowed it back. V'yasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham va'anachnu nivarech yam me'ata v'yad olam. Everybody join me. O Lord, prepare me to be your sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. In thanksgiving, I'll be your living sanctuary for you. One more time in Hebrew if you know it. V'yasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham va'anachnu nivarech yam me'ata v'yad olam. I love the era that we're in, that we can finally give attribution when we learn something from a different tradition. We really can't help it, because if we steal something, we're going to get caught on the internet anyway. So we might as well acknowledge it's a Buddhist story, it's a Jewish story. Well, this is a true story I'm going to share with you, and I want to dedicate it to, of course, peace in Ukraine and peace in Israel, peace throughout the whole Middle East. It's a true story. I heard this from one of my teachers, Rabbi Shlomo Kraubach, and it's called Mideast Air, and it goes like this. So Reb Shlomo was a very famous songwriter. Some of the songs that I sang before are his melodies. And he traveled all around the world and sang and gave concerts and beautiful, beautiful Devar Torahs, beautiful teachings. And one time he had a concert to do in Paris, and it was all the way on the other side of France. And his travel agent called him and said, "Reb Shlomo, I'm really sorry, but the airplane from Marseille to Paris, it's been canceled. There's no way to get you there." And he said, "No way to get me there? I've got this big concert." And the travel agent, she said, "Look, It happens to be a seat left on Mideast Airlines. And I'm really concerned about it because, he's wearing a kippah and he's dressed like a Hasidic Jew. And it was really at the time of the Intifada and a time of great turmoil. And she said, it could be pretty dangerous, and I'm not sure I'm recommending it to you. He said, okay, give me a couple of hours. There's an old Hasidic saying, he said, that if you want to get advice, to ask a wise person and listen to what she says. Or ask a fool and do the opposite. And he said, Baruch Hashem, that God gives us lots of fools all around us, so we should always know what to do. So he goes to his friends in Marseille, and he says, listen, I've got this dilemma. The only seat that's left is Mideast Airlines. It could be dangerous. Should I get on the plane? They all said, no, Reb Shlomo, it's too dangerous. Don't do it. And he went, I'm going. Gets on the plane. They get off the ground. And the stewardess comes up to him as she's walking around. She said, sir, what's that on your head? And he stood up and he said, ma'am, I want to tell you 4 things. 1, I love you. 2, you're my sister. 3, it's a kippah. And 4, I look forward to the day that you and I can dance together in the streets of Jerusalem. She stared back at him. She said, sir, I have 3 things to tell you. 1, I love you. 2, you're my brother. And 3, I look forward to the time when we can dance together in the streets of Jerusalem. So they chatted, and they really made this very deep connection. She found out that he's a songwriter and a singer and a rabbi. And she said, I got to tell the pilot that you're on the plane. This is kind of really a big moment for a big famous Jewish songwriter and rabbi to be on Mideast Airlines. I'm going to get the pilot. So a minute later, the pilot came out, the co-pilot came out, the navigator pilot. Shlomo's thinking, who's steering the plane, right? Who's steering the plane? And he looked up and said, we're in good hands. And they all chatted and talked and exchanged cards and everything. And Shlomo said at that moment, this was not me, and this was not the stewardess and the pilot. This was the children of Isaac with the children of Ishmael meeting each other. That's how deep that was. That's how deep that was. And as they were deplaning and they were looking forward to getting together, this great moment had occurred between them, this great connection. A week later, Reb Shlomo was back at his home in Manhattan, and he read on page 3 of the New York Times that a plane had gotten hijacked. And the names of the people who were killed in the hijacking included the co-pilot of that plane and the stewardess. And he said, I say Kaddish, the prayer for the dead, for many, many people. But I've never stopped saying Kaddish for these 2 holy people. Never stopped saying Kaddish for them. And this is the way he finished his story. Rabbi Nachman says, Rabbi Nachman asks, how does war begin? Rabbi Nachman says, he answers this is how war begins. When a mother or a father put their child to bed at night, and they don't say, I love you, my sweetest, my darling, you're the most important person in the world to me. I love you so much. I love you so much. Rabbi Nachman says, that's how war begins. Rabbi Nachman asks, this is what he asks, how does peace begin? Rabbi Nachman answers, this is what he says, this is how peace begins. When the mama and the papa put their child to bed at night, and and they say, I love you so much. My sweetest, my darling, you're the most important person in the world to me. I love you so much. Rabbi Nachman says, this is what he says. That's how peace begins. Shalom. Shalom. Please join me. Shalom. Shalom. Salam. 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 Shalom. Shalom. Salam. Shalom. That's how peace begins. That's how peace begins. Devorah, you have a story?
I do. You know, we advertised this weekend as kind of preparation for Passover and getting through those narrow spots and opening our hearts. So I think what better way to open hearts than by song and story. So every year, you know, I look for a new story to tell at High Holy Days. And one year I came across a story called, it's a Baal Shem Tov story. Baal Shem Tov meaning the founder of Hasidism. He was the holy Chassid. And really Reb Zalman is in the lineage of the Baal Shem Tov. And there's many, many stories about him. And this story was called Reb Aryeh and the Language of the Birds. Well, I was immediately attracted to it. The founder of our shul was Reb Aryeh Hirschfeld, Alav Shalom. He had died recently. And I'm a birder, which means that my hobby is looking at, watching birds. And when I first discovered birding, you know, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, it was kind of like discovering another world. All of a sudden, through these binoculars, I saw all of these intricately colored, feathered creatures that had always been there, but I'd never noticed. It was kind of like when you go snorkeling the first time and you're above the water and there's no fish, and then you look down, if you're in Hawaii or someplace exotic, and there's another world filled with color and movement. That's how I felt about birding. So Reb Aryeh learns the language of the birds. Sounded like a perfect story for me. But in the story, the Baal Shem Tov kind of resists teaching Aryeh the language of the birds. And I wanted to learn the language of the birds, by the way. At that time, I was particularly interested in identifying birds by their sounds. So I was taking classes on it and so on. And I also, more than just identifying them, I really wanted to be connected to that mysterious language of flight that always seems just out of reach, those sounds and songs. So I thought, this is a great story. But in the story, the Baal Shem Tov really doesn't, when he finally gets convinced he's going to teach Reb Aryeh the language of the birds, which is a very complicated language, and Reb Aryeh really doesn't understand it, he doesn't follow the rules, and the story ends kind of badly. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why it couldn't end differently, and I thought, well, I've got several months to figure this out. So let's fast forward up to about August, which is about a month before High Holy Days. And it turned out that that particular year, this was 2009, David and I were in Italy. David was doing a wedding in Tuscany, and long story short, we were traveling a little bit before the wedding, so it was August, and it was my birthday, August 24th, and we were in Assisi. Assisi, as in St. Francis of Assisi, I see you nodding your heads, who was one of the few people, besides the Baal Shem Tov, who also understood the language of the birds. Well, I thought this was a sign. This was an omen. I was going to get a revelation, and I was pretty much ready for it. After all, it was my birthday. So I thought I would prepare for it. I looked in all the guidebooks, and I looked up all the frescoes and so on, and I identified fresco number 34 on the bottom of the basilica. And that's the fresco that's titled St. Francis Gives His Sermon to the Birds, and that's where I was headed. Now, in order to get up to the basilica, though, you have to walk up a steep hill. And as I said, it was August in Italy, and it was 40 degrees Celsius, which translates to, I see you get that, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And you have to walk up a hill. And there's a lot of other tourists going. So it's kind of like a group sweaty pilgrimage up this hill until you finally get in the basilica. And of course, the basilica is built, like all of the buildings in that part of Italy, out of these thick, heavy stones. So you would think it would be cooler once you got inside. But you would be wrong, because those stones have been kind of storing up the heat all summer, and it's August. So when you get inside, it's actually even warmer, right? I think the heat is making me want a drink of water. And so when you get inside, if you are sleeveless, which you are because it's 104 degrees outside, they give you a kind of paper poncho for modesty's sake to cover your shoulders if you are female, which of course. And it's made out of the same kind of fabric that airline pillowcases used to be made out of. Remember when airlines gave you pillows, right? Which means that it's especially synthetic, right? And meant to exaggerate and hold in any heat that's already there. So it's Assisi pilgrimage time with synthetic covering. Well, I didn't want to go right up to the fresco that I wanted to see, St. Francis Gives His Sermon to the Birds, because I wanted to prepare for it. I'm always suspicious of premature enlightenment, so I thought I would do my homework. So I started out on the bottom row, going through every single fresco. Now, these frescoes on the bottom are very flat, pre-Raphaelite, almost Egyptian looking. The ones upstairs, the more famous Giotto frescoes, are fancier, but these are the very primitive ones. And each one of them depicts St. Francis in different stages of his life. But on his head in these frescoes, it's all very flat. He's wearing this sort of, it's supposed to be a halo, but it looks like a pie plate. It's kind of flat, round, ridged, exactly on top of his head. So whatever he's doing it with this sort of paper pie plate looking thing. So first here's St. Francis in his crib. And then here's St. Francis as a teenager, and then here's St. Francis getting anointed, and here's St. Francis in every phase of his life, but he does it all with this kind of surreal pie plate riding over his head. And I went through every single fresco, every phase of his life, and then I turned the corner, and there it was. It has kind of a corner of its own, and it's a much larger fresco, and there is St. Francis Gives His Sermon to the Birds. And it's very flat, like the other frescoes, and there's St. Francis. He's in his robes, as you always see him in statues, and there's grass, and there's trees, and there's sky, and there's birds, and they're very flat. They almost look like Disney white birds, and they're all through the sky, and there's St. Francis. And I was waiting for a revelation. But it kind of looked like all the other frescoes, and there's his pie plate riding over his head. And I thought, well, maybe I'll wait. After all, I've come a long way. And sometimes I'm a little bit greedy for enlightenment, I have to admit. And there I was, but I thought, okay, I will wait and I'll see something will happen. I'll have a revelation. And other tourists came and went, and I stood there, and I stood there, and I stared at it. I just stared at it. I wasn't going to leave. And suddenly, something shifted. It was kind of like, there was a fad in the 80s where there's these art books, and you look at them, and you see the picture, but then you kind of blur your vision, and then suddenly you see 3D happening, and you see what's going on behind it, another picture. And suddenly, my inner vision blurred, and I saw what was going on in that picture, in that fresco. I saw that St. Francis wasn't giving a sermon to the birds. He was simply so completely tuned in to the divine flow around him, in the trees, in the grass, in the sky, in the birds. He was so completely tuned in that he wasn't giving a sermon to the birds. He was simply just a part of the divine conversation. And at that moment, a beam of light came in the window from the side, and that pie plate lit up like a halo. Okay, I might have imagined that part. But I recognized that state of being in the divine flow. I've been there, not very often, but sometimes deep in meditation, or deep in prayer, or even in dance or song, or even when I'm really in the flow of storytelling. Once in a while, I feel it. I feel everything connected. But most of the time, I walk around so tightened into the shape of a productive human that the world is just like a flat fresco. Now, remember, the reason I wanted that revelation about the birds was because I was looking for some way to understand the story of Reb Aryeh in the language of the birds. And at the end of this story, the Baal Shem Tov says to Reb Aryeh, it doesn't matter. He waves his hand in front of his face, he forgets all the instructions he's given him, and he said, you don't need to understand the language of the birds. It's very complicated. You don't need to understand it to serve God. And I added at the end of the story, the only thing you need to know is Adonai Echad. Adonai Echad. We say it all the time in the Shema, right? God, there's one God, right? But it also means God is one. It's all God. God is oneness. And as long as we tune into that, we don't need to understand any complicated instructions about the language of the birds. Because the birds, we can feel them talking. If we only pay attention to the divine flow that's going on all the time, all around us, then the world is not a flat fresco. And right before Passover now, if we can get in touch in some way, whether that means in prayer, whether it's in meditation, whether it's doing whatever we love the most, if we can be in that divine flow, then our hearts will open and it'll flow us right out of the Red Sea.
I think I want to stand in the middle for this story. Just to continue a little bit, if you remember when we went into the church in Assisi, so one of the nuns came up to me who was like a host, and she said, I know no Italian, but she said to me, she was gesturing, please, sir, take off your hat, right? Because it's polite. So this is a terrible thing to do, but I speak fake Italian, okay? So I said to her, Ani, Hebrew, Ani rabbino giudaico. This is my hat, though. I have to wear my hat. And she's going, no, take it off. No, rabbino. Is that how you say rabbi? Judaica, Jewish. You just add an O. So I said, I am a pristo, Judaico pristo. It was going on for a minute, 2 minutes. She finally said, oh, you veyes, man, go and do whatever you want. She didn't speak in Yiddish, but she just walked away from me. So I kept wearing my hat. Zalman, at the time we were in Hawaii, we took him snorkeling. And it was the first time he'd ever been snorkeling. You've snorkeled in Hawaii? You look into the water, it's, it makes Disney look like deep fake, right? You're looking under, the colors are unbelievable. Zalman puts his head under the water, he's looking all around. He comes back up, he says to Devara, he says, oi, such diversity, and they all get along. Next minute, maybe they start eating each other, but for a moment they get along. So I really want to dedicate this for us all getting along. I'm just curious, anybody from any churches here in town? What church are you from? What? Church of the Red Rock. Is that a particular flavor, denomination, I mean? United Church of Christ. UCC, okay, great. Anybody else from any other churches? Yeah, please.
Well, I'm a member here, but I also am a member at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church.
Great, Episcopal, UCC, yeah.
St. John the Catholic.
Beautiful, good, that's great. Anybody else? Yeah.
It's the Sedona Unitarian Universalist Fellowship.
Great, Unitarian. Beautiful, okay. Anybody else? Well, good. So really this story is in celebration of diversity. It's a true story. When Aryeh Hirschfield, the founder of our community, died in a terrible, terrible accident, I became the interim rabbi up in Portland, Oregon, and I traveled there every month. And we were, at that particular time, holding our services in one of the Presbyterian churches. And so from Friday night, we would come in and celebrate Shabbat, and Saturday morning, and then Sunday morning, of course, was the church services. And it was a beautiful, beautiful church. They had one of these crucifixes that they fixed up for the Jewish community so that we had a banner with the letters of God's name in Hebrew, and we could pull down the banner. It was on a crank. It went, and the letters of God's name would cover the crucifix. And then after the service, we go, I love doing sound effects, so I may have to do that a few more times. So, and the banner would go up, and there would be the crucifix. And it was a beautiful arrangement between the Presbyterians and the Jewish community. Well, we have our services on Friday, and Reverend Barbara Campbell became my dear friend, and she calls me on Wednesday night. She said, Rabbi David, I didn't realize this, but we've got a problem. I went, what? She said, well, I didn't realize it, but this Friday is Good Friday. So we're not going to be able to have you use the sanctuary. You know, you can use the social hall if you'd like, but you can't use the sanctuary. And I went, oh, wow, that's so disappointing. Then she said, wait, I have an idea. You're coming in tomorrow? I said, yes. She said, let's meet tomorrow, and let's just talk this through. So I flew up to Portland, and on Thursday, I went into her office, and I said, so what is, do you know what the problem is? For those of you who know the Good Friday story, it may not be in the Unitarian, but in Catholic tradition and certainly Episcopal tradition, Good Friday was not really a Good Friday for the Jewish people. The Passion story is told usually from the book of John, sometimes with a little flourishes from Matthew. The Jews do not look so good, right? The Pharisees look like hypocrites. Jesus' Jewishness is completely buried. And so it's a difficult time. In fact, in Eastern Europe, like where my mother is from, in Ukraine, Jewish people would hide out on Good Friday. They just hide away because of the danger. So Reverend Barbara anticipated what I was going to be talking about. I said, look, we can't do the service. But she said, let's do it together. I said, no, that's even worse. We can't do it together. I don't think the Jewish community will really want to be in the sanctuary when the Passion story is being told. They do it with costumes and the whole thing. And she said, is the problem in the text? I said, yes, the problem is in the text. She already anticipated what I was going to be talking about, so she had her computer open with the New Testament word processor, and she said, okay, is the problem that his name was really Joshua and not Jesus? I said, well, that's problematic because his name was Yehoshua, Joshua. So she does a search and replace of all where it says Jesus, she made it Joshua, Rabbi Joshua. Rabbi Joshua, sound good? I said, yeah, it sounds pretty good. She said, is part of the problem Judas, who betrays him because Judas means the Jew who betrayed Jesus? I said, yeah, that's pretty problematic. So she does a search and replace, and every time it said Judas, she changes it to the betrayer. She said, does that sound pretty good? I said, yeah, it sounds pretty good. She said, oh, Rabbi David, this is so brave of you. I said, brave of me? I've been waiting 2,000 years to change the New Testament. This is brave of you, So we went through this thing, where it says the Jews. She changed it to a handful of betrayers, things like that. She says, okay, now can we do it together? I said, I'm not sure. I really have to ask the Jewish community if they'd be comfortable doing that. And so everybody shut your cell phones off. And so I said to the Jewish community, listen, we're going to have two services. We're going to try going into the main sanctuary and do this interfaith experiment. And those of you, if you're not comfortable with it, please, you'll be in the social hall. You'll be led by the cantor there, Bruce Morris, and he'll lead some songs. So it ends up, we all go into the sanctuary. Nobody went into the social hall. They all wanted to see what was going to happen to the Passion story retold from a more historic point of view. So here's what happens. So it was what is it called, Tenebrae service? Where they light the candles and diminish the candles, right? And so Pastor Barbara says to me, now listen, before we started, you're going to light the Shabbat candles, we're going to light all the other candles, and the Shabbat candles will be the last ones extinguished in honor of the Jewish people. I went, no, Barbara, we don't extinguish our Shabbat candles. We just got to keep them on. She said, oh, that's even better. We'll just keep the Shabbat candles on. The Jewish people live, we persist. You persist. I went, okay, we'll try it that way. So the sanctuary got darker and darker and darker as each part of the Passion story was told. And there was only the Shabbat candles were lit. It was an amazing moment. But here's what happened. The communion was about to begin. And I wish I could be three people because I need to be three people to tell you this part of it. But I decided that while the communion service was going on, that I was going to do the priestly benediction. We call it the Yivarechecha. May God bless you and keep you, protect you, watch over you. The countenance of God be upon you, and grant you shalom. So I was going to do the priestly benediction. I'm wearing my prayer shawl. I have my hands out like this. And as the communion is going on, now, I was in back of the table where the communion was taking place. So everybody was in front of me coming to take communion, and I'm going, and it's going on and on and on, and I was getting tired. My arms are getting tired. Now, you squeeze your arms a little bit. This is kind of a rabbinic trick, right? You make it look part of the ritual. So my arms are getting tired, and finally I go like this, like this. Now you have to understand, the crucifix is right behind me. So I've moved back, and I get closer. The crucifix is really low, and I'm standing right in front of the crucifix like this. And I see people from the Jewish community looking at me going. My friend Bruce Morris said to me after, he says, you look like Jesus if he had lived to be 70 years old. You look like an old Jesus. Well, okay, so there I am, standing there like this in the dark. People are staring at me. It was a profound moment because it wasn't like planned. I would have never done that. I would have never stood in front of a crucifix like this. But there was something symbolic, emblematic, representative of prejudices for over the hundreds, thousands of years. There was something representative of a healing that was going on, that I could even be in a church on Good Friday. There was something representative of somebody like Pastor Barbara Campbell, who had the courage to go into the text and say, it's not good, it's not right the way it is. And there's no shame in changing it. In fact, I feel commanded by God to have done what I did. So it was just an amazing moment. That ritual went on for years until finally the church got too small and they dissipated and joined another church. But it went on for another 10 years. And I want to send my blessings to Pastor Barbara Campbell. I want to send my blessings to all the members of that Presbyterian church and of the Jewish community of the Havarah for that particular moment. And I just really want to thank God for that opportunity, to be able to stretch my arms and relax while I was doing the blessing. Thank you. Let me get my...
This is a poem that David wrote about. It's called Pentecost for Two Voices.
So, as you might know, the calendar, the Gregorian calendar that we're on, is a solar calendar. The Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar. So Ramadan, I remember about 12 years ago, was in the autumn, and now it's in the spring. So their holidays actually circulate around the year. The Christian holidays stay kind of fixed. So what is Easter, for example? It's the first Sunday after the vernal, after the full moon of the vernal equinox, okay? So Christians have that down. It's sort of a little bit lunar based, but it's the first Sunday after the full moon, after the vernal equinox. The Jews do something even wilder. We have a lunar calendar, but we adjust the calendar every 4 years. We have a leap month. Not a leap day, but a leap month. In fact, we just finished, today's the last day actually, is this the last day of Adar, or is the full, right? Tomorrow is the new moon. So, we'll let the poem just stand by itself, okay? Passover and Easter.
Two moon-linked sisters who long ago stopped speaking to each other.
Yet each linked to the fullness of our hearts and the fullness of God's grace.
The moon of Sister Miriam desires freedom and the rescue of her people from the cruelty of Pharaoh.
By the outstretched mighty hand of the Lord, a hand of salvation reaching down from heaven and passing through my nation.
And down through yours, and then to each and every one of us.
So may it be.
The moon of Mother Mary desires to give her light so that each man and woman may know the power of resurrection.
And the soil of death that holds the seeds of rebirth within.
A resurrection reaching upward.
Passing through all nations and up to God Almighty.
Two celebrations, two women, Miriam and Mary, who don't even know they have the same name.
One in Hebrew and one in Greek, yet linked to a single full moon, and then we each begin to count.
We both count to 50, beyond the 40 days of Moses on Mount Sinai.
And Jesus in the wilderness, we go beyond one cycle further to 50, Shavuot, the Pentecost.
Ours to the revelation of Torah at Sinai.
Yours to the revelation of the Holy Spirit.
Freedom and resurrection.
Revelation and revelation.
12 tribes and 12 disciples.
One moon, two traditions.
Two covenants, one God.
Shavuot and Pentecost.
Two cousins who have just begun to speak.
And King David sings to us from his tomb today, teach us to count our days, that we may open our hearts to your wisdom. Some of us, thank God, are listening. Some of us, thank God, are listening. Messiah?
One more little story that you might have heard. This is a story from M. Scott Momaday's book, A Different Drum. And it says it's a Hasidic story. But I have never, and none of my storyteller friends, which are extensive in the small world of storytelling, have ever found a Jewish source for it. So once, deep in the woods, there was a monastery that had once been a thriving center of spirituality in the realm. But over the years, it had fallen into decay. And where there had once been many monks, and you could hear their voices singing out, now there was just a faint mumble coming from the monastery. And where there had once been beautiful, manicured, tended gardens, now there was just a tangle of weeds. And there were only 4 monks left, the abbot and 3 brothers. And they knew that if something didn't happen soon, that order would die out. Now also in that woods, there was a little hut, and there was a rabbi who had come to stay in that hut for a hermitage every now and then when he needed to be alone. Now, the monks, who were all over 70 years old, had been together many years, and they had developed a little bit of psychic power. And when the rabbi would come, they would look at each other and say, "The rabbi's in the woods." And on one of these times, the abbot decided to pay a visit to the rabbi. And when he got there, the rabbi welcomed him warmly and said, "What brings you here?" And the abbot said, "Well, I was wondering if you have any advice for me. Our monastery is dying out. There are no new young people signing up, and it looks as if the order is going to die out. Do you have any advice?" And the rabbi said, "Oy vey, it's the same way in our shul. None of the young people come around anymore, and things seem to be dying down. I'm afraid I don't have any advice for you. But since you're here, why don't you come in? We'll spend a little time together." And the rabbi came in, and they studied together, and they prayed together. They had a little food. They had a wonderful afternoon together. And when it was time to go, the abbot said, "Are you sure you don't have any advice for me?" The rabbi said, "I'm really sorry, I don't have any advice. I would tell you, though, that the Messiah is one of you." Well, when the abbot got back to the monastery, the brothers said, "What did he say? What did the rabbi say? Did he have any advice?" The abbot said, "No, he didn't have any advice. But he did say something that was kind of cryptic. He said, 'The Messiah is one of you.'" Well, now, in the days that followed, each of the monks turned that phrase over in his mind. The Messiah is one of you. What could that mean? Could that mean the Messiah is here among us? Could that mean one of us is the Messiah? And if it was, well, which one of it? Well, it would have to be the abbot. I mean, he's the oldest and the wisest. I mean, it couldn't be Father Philip. I mean, he's such a nobody. But he does have a way of always being there when you need him. Well, it couldn't be Father Thomas. I mean, he's such a know-it-all. But he is usually right. And it couldn't be, could it be me? No. And each one of them began to treat the other ones with great respect on the off chance that that one could be the Messiah. And they began to treat themselves with great respect on the off chance that they themselves could be the Messiah. And things began to change around the monastery. The prayers began to be more deep, and the singing rang out more resonantly. All of the focus went into everything that they did. And the gardens, those weeds began to be tended, and the gardens began to bloom again. And everything that emanated from the monastery projected an aura of extreme respect. And when people in the forest walked by, they could hear the beautiful sounds of the monks singing in harmony, and they saw the beautiful gardens. And young people began to come into the monastery and sign up for the monastery. And eventually, that monastery became once again a thriving center of spirituality in the realm. And all because of the rabbi's simple gift. And may we all treat each other and each other's faith traditions with extraordinary respect.
Amen. You know, a couple of little anecdotes I want to share with you, and one is our Rebbe who ordained Rabbi Elisha and myself, Reb Zalman. He used to take his retreats every summer in Gethsemane in Kentucky because he had befriended Thomas Merton. You all know who Merton is? An amazing Catholic mystic, an amazing writer. And Merton and Zalman, Reb Zalman became really, really staunch allies and staunch friends with one another. And one of the things Reb Zalman told me about one time was that the Psalms become the unifying link between Christians and Jews. So when we're doing interfaith work, he said, always just pull out the Psalms, because that's a great bridge between our faith traditions. And he said, for example, when I used to go to Gethsemane, there was one time when I heard Merton chanting one of the Psalms into the valley from the back of the hermitage, and I knew what psalm it was. And so as he was chanting it in Latin, I started chanting it in Hebrew. And all the other brothers came around, and everybody was in awe listening to the beautiful psalm of King David in Latin and in Hebrew harmoniously. So I had the honor of having that similar experience when we were in Hawaii. That particular Hawaii story is that as when Friday night came and we were about to celebrate the Shabbat, we had a gathering of Mika Halaroi, who is the keeper of this holy site, and the Jewish community all coming together facing this Heiau, this holy site. And so Mika Halaroi started chanting in Hawaiian, and everybody was in awe at the beauty of her singing. And then, wouldn't you know it, Reb Zalman starts chanting from Psalm 90 in Hebrew simultaneously while she's chanting in Hawaiian. It was just a beautiful moment, a beautiful moment. And I bless us all to sing with each other. Not just to say we believe this and you believe that, but to start singing with each other and start learning about each other's faith traditions from the inside. And finally, just one maybe little anecdote, a story of hope, was that after the murders of the Jews in the Pittsburgh synagogue, many people in our synagogue were afraid to come to the shul. They were afraid to come to our synagogue. And so the local imam, the local sheikh and teacher of the mosque, brought Muslims to come to our community and said, we're here to protect you. We're here to protect you. And a few years later, when Muslims were killed in Christchurch in New Zealand, the imam called me up and he said, now our Muslims are afraid to come to Friday morning prayers. Could you bring some Jewish people for Friday morning prayers? It was such an honor to not just go there, but to actually pray. You know, I was praying from our Jewish tradition while the Muslims were praying in Arabic. It was really, really a great moment. And so I think I want to finish with this song. Many of you know this already. Oseh shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru, imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael. Everyone stand. Yaseh shalom, Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. May the one who makes peace in the heavens make peace for all of us, for all of Israel, for all of Yishmael, for the whole world. And we say Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Romav, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. V'yemru, Imru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel. Shavua Tov, everybody. It's a new moon. It's the beginning of a new week. Tomorrow, we call it the first day on Sunday. We're coming up to Passover. We just passed Easter, and it's been such an honor, and I really want to thank Rabbi Magal for inviting us to be here. Thank you so much.
It feels funny to clap because it's like a prayer. But let's turn our clapping into a prayer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us.